Welcome to the Edition Wars podcast, where we discuss RPG ideas, compare rules, establish sacred cows, fight about what's best, kill the cows, and generally geek out over our favorite games. I'm Brandon Stoddard.
And I'm Sam Dillon, and in this episode we are discussing skill systems in D&D through the editions. So, Brandis,
Sam.
do you like skills?
I like skills, and I cannot lie.
Do you like big skills?
Actually, no. No, that's going to come up, and I don't, and we'll talk about why.
Okay, so let's define what we mean by skill systems. You know, Dungeons and Dragons is a class-based game. That's how it's referred to, sort of in the industry, because most of the things that occur happen because you have a class and you level. So it's a class and level-based system, and when you level, your class gives you more abilities, and your level that you level up to might give you more abilities depending on which edition you're playing. So as part of that package in some of the editions, there was the capability or the ability or the possible abilities, depending on the edition, to get some increase in some type of skill that was secondary to the basics of hitting things with your sword or casting a spell. Would you say that's fair?
Yep, it is all those kinds of actions you might undertake that aren't specifically casting the spell or attacking with a weapon or avoiding a spell, I guess. It's as distinct from saving throws, which we've already covered.
Right. Let me give you the quick lowdown on the editions of the game before there was really a skill system. Okay. So if we go back to original D&D, we're talking, 1974, 1977, that sort of thing. The first three books in the original box set, Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasure, and Underworld and Wilderness, did not have any kind of skill systems whatsoever. And even in those three books, there weren't even thieves, so there weren't even thief skills. The best you could do was get to a high enough level that you were able to have a keep or castle that a stronghold, in other words, that you were the sort of boss of, or the lord, or the baron, or whatever your title you wanted. You could actually hire specialists who could come and work in your keep, and they would have specific skill sets that they had. But those were not PCs; they were all NPCs. So there was really no skill system to talk about. And then the Greyhawk supplement came out in 1975, and that introduced thieves into the game, and thieves had thieves skills like pick locks and remove traps and listen at doors and move stealthily, and something they call stake silently from behind, which is really just backstab. But the thing is that that's not really a skill system. Those aren't even referred to as skills. They're abilities because they are connected directly to the class. So I figure we're not really talking about those per se, at least not the way they were implemented in this edition.
So I do think that we have to say a few words about their resolution mechanic, at least, because
Yes.
because we're going to be contrasting them later with other editions where they do exist in more tension with a skill system that everyone can use.
Okay, so let me go into a little more nitty gritty then, since you're making a good point here. So here are the skills or the abilities, right? Pick locks and open doors, detecting and removing traps, listening at doors, stealthy movement, picking pockets, hiding in shadows, staking silently from behind, and climbing a nearly sheer surface. And then also at third level, that's what you get at first level if you're a thief. And all of those, except for listening at doors, are based on a percentage roll. So you roll a D100, and usually the percentages for first level characters start out at like between 10 and 20%. So some of them are 10, some are 15, some are 20. And so that's not a very high percentage of succeeding at that task.
No.
At third level, they also get read languages. so they can read and decipher any sort of script other than magical ones, because at 10th level, then they can actually understand magical writing, so they technically can read arcane scrolls, although they cannot read divine ones. Now, what's really interesting about this skill set is it did something that was tricky with the demi-humans, the dwarves, the elves, the half-elves, halflings. If you're a different class and you're a dwarf, elf, half-elf, or halfling, you actually have a level limit to what you can do and how much you can progress. But if you're a thief, your level limit has no limit to its advancement. So you can actually keep improving your thief skills even as your other abilities stop improving and the other things that you can do stop improving, which is kind of an interesting thing. And really, I think that was a specific way to make it more enticing for one of those demi-human races to play a thief character.
So I was
So
I was not yet a gleam in my father's eye when this was the current edition.
yes,
So I I have read OSR bloggers who swear blind that the introduction of the thief class was the beginning of the end for the perfect design of OD&D, and uh, moreover, that before that skill system came in, uh, everything was perfect because the player just told the GM what they wanted to do, and the GM had it happen or not according to their personal inclinations. Is that how it tended to play for non-combat actions, or how did people actually handle that at the table for really real?
that's exactly so. So technically speaking, that this system also suggested having the DM was a referee still. That's what they were called, and
Right.
the players were the players. But then it suggested that you nominate one of them to be the caller that actually tells the DM what everyone is doing, so that you get so this is the sort of this is kind of a different topic, but it's the sort of gateway to metagaming, because you have a caller that's designated. Anything you say doesn't actually mean you're doing that. You're just talking, and you can metagame all you want, because also in part this game relied on players playing smartly, not just what their PC would know, but what they themselves know. And so they could metagame, have a discussion, talk about tactics, talk about strategy, do all that stuff. And the DM would only give an adjudication or a ruling if the caller turned to the DM and said, okay, here's what this person's doing, here's what I'm doing, here's what this other character's doing, here's what. Now, in actuality, lots of parties threw that caller idea out the window after trying it a couple of times. Some people still used it, and so I'm going to get hate mail on both sides, right? But that's sort of how that goes. That some tables use those, and in my experience, most tables did not, because people wanted to feel like they were determining their own action. So it's interesting that you bring up that they think it's the comments are that it was the end, because here's the next thing that happened. Later that same year, the Blackmore supplement came out, so supplement 4 or 5, right? And the Blackmore supplement had the assassin subclass in it, so it was a subclass of thieves. So it got all the thief skills, and it also got the skill of disguise and the skill of using poisons. In that same book, there was a monk class that was introduced. Monks were sort of this cleric thief hybrid, so they also could perform thief skills along with some other abilities like speak with animals and plants. And then that also that had some consequences. And then the next year, Eldritch Wizardry came out, which introduced psionics. And you might think that's not related, but some of the psionic powers at low levels are more like abilities, and they're treated more like skills, but ultimately they have spell-like effects in a way. So there was sort of a mesh there. So all of these things sort of culminated in just a few years, 1974 to 1976. All of this was happening, and the game really relied upon the DM being fair in their adjudication of whatever the players said they were doing. And so if there was no thief class, if you did not have the Greyhawk supplement, you didn't have the Blackmore supplement, you all you had was the initial fighting man and magic user and then like dwarves and elves that you had in the initial supplement, in the initial box set, then all you had was that. And the DM basically told you everything. There was no skill unless the DM, homebrewed that. There was no skill attached to anything that you did. It was about player skill and less about PC skill.
Yep, yep, yep.
And so you didn't need a skill system, right?
And I can definitely understand how uh, giving the thief a percentage chance to move silently uh, is an explicit statement that another character can't do that,
Right.
or at least there's no resolution mechanic, so it sounds to many reasonable listeners as if you're saying, no, you can't do that.
Right. Yeah. The only one who has the ability to do that's why I brought up the thing about not calling it skills, but instead calling it abilities. Because basically what this says is the only one in the party who has the ability to pick locks is the thief. The only one in the party who has the ability to move stealthily is the thief. The only one in the party who has the ability to hide in shadows is the thief. The only one who has the ability to climb a sheer surface is the thief. So the other types of party members, regardless of who the player is, those other types of characters do not have those abilities. So it's actually an important fact that it's not called a skill, it's called an ability because it's an ability related to the class. And so you're right. The implication is if you don't have that ability as part of your class setup, then you don't have uh, that ability. Literally, you cannot even attempt it because you don't have that ability.
Let's see. I'm checking back through the original Ranger to see if they
Mm,
had anything that could
hmm
be mistaken for a skill, but
Mistaken for, yeah. Well, so shortly after that, Holmes Basic D&D in 1977. It's really no different from the boxes because, of course, as we talked about before, Holmes Basic really was meant to uh, give you 3 levels and then parlay you directly into AD&D First Edition. So when you got to the end of that sort of box set, you were meant to go buy First Edition and play that. And in First Edition, you didn't have a skill system, not in the player's handbook anyway. And you had BECMI D&D, the Basic Expert Companion. That's the Mincer red box starting set. And then you also had Moldvay Cook, Moldvay Cook in 79 and 80, maybe 81. Mincer, I think first year was 83. So those that span of products, all of those things happened in the late 70s and early to mid 80s, and none of them really had true skill sets in them. That they didn't have a true skill system at all, and most things were related to either race or class and were called abilities. It wasn't until 89 when second edition came out that you ended up with something like proficiencies and consequently wait, I know, but hold on, I just want to connect this. So consequently the rules cyclopedia came out in 1991 that also included that sort of skill system because all throughout the BECMI run, they were sort of working in their gazetteer line, they were working in different skills and things. So by the time the Rules Cyclopedia came out, by the time basically the end of the BECMI line was happening, there was actually an optional skill system. So I know we don't want to get to second edition yet, but I just wanted to give that whole setup for the basic and the original D&D stuff. And now let's come back to what you were looking for.
okay, so you're right, of course, to point out that there's a skill system in in BECMI and the Rules Cyclopedia. Its core mechanic looks like every skill is tied to an ability score, and if you have the skill, you just need to roll under your ability score with a d20 to succeed.
Correct. That's right. The higher your attribute, the easier it is to succeed at that skill.
Right. Um,
Right.
and
They also had weapon mastery in the rules cyclopedia, by the
right,
way.
yeah. Um, so then we also have Oriental Adventures in 1985, which I have open in front of me, and that, interestingly enough, has um, uh, non-weapon proficiencies that would be very recognizable to a second edition player, um, and uh, calls them peaceful proficiencies in some cases, which is distinguishing them from weapon proficiencies, of course. Um,
Was that peaceful as in non-combat, or was it trying to play on the Eastern peaceful religions like Buddhism and Zen?
uh, oh, uh, it seems to be pretty strictly in the sense of non-combat, but um, there's an interesting little rule where the book invites the DM to give the player a bonus of +1 or +2 um, if they can provide an example that of that thing, such as a poetry skill. If you give the DM a uh, piece of Chinese or Japanese poetry, um, that might be worth a +1. If you can actually perform the skill, such as writing a haiku, uh, the DM can
Hmm.
allow a bonus of +2. This is strictly an optional rule. Um, I I think that's an interesting set of choices. Uh, sort of unusual. Um, but then we get into the rest of the, the skill system here, and uh, I mean it's pretty dense material that I frankly haven't looked over in any detail in a long time. But
So that was
eh, so
1985.
you have it's 1985. So you have the large number of individually defined skills, which are separated into different categories of proficiency. So you have artisan proficiencies, barbarian proficiencies, common proficiencies, court proficiencies, and uh, that's all sort of determining who can do what, and then each skill requires one or more
Mhm.
proficiency slots, um, in a way that again is very recognizable to people who played second edition, um, which is what most people think of as the first non-weapon proficiency.
In 1987 is the year. I was just looking it up on my copy here. It's the year that the first gazetteer, the first BECMI gazetteer came out, which was the Grand Duchy of Keramikos. Um, and it actually has, of course, a section on what they call them in BECMI, they call them general skills. And that's what
Uh-huh.
ends up in the rule cyclopedia. So it's the D20 roll. It's attached to a attribute score. There's some rules in here for improving them, learning more, that sort of thing. And then that gets carried basically through all the entire Gazetteer series. So, like Gazetteer about the Dwarves of Rockholm, it has a section on general skills for dwarves, but it's the same basic setup, right? It's about what attribute is this skill attached to? What does the skill let you do? And how do you succeed at that skill? And what does that mean? It gives some tips, to the GM for, to the DM for how to adjudicate a success or failure in very 1987, 1988 terms, right? And it's completely optional. None of
For
these
sure.
were prescribed as this is what you will do in your game now. It was here's some extra options.
Right. The non-weapon proficiencies in Oriental Adventures do seem to uh, be assumed
Hmm.
as something you'll adopt. Um, so as far as I can tell, your ability scores don't influence your skill rolls in any way
Right.
in Oriental Adventures. Uh, Instead, you have a base chance of success, which is a number that is somewhere between uh, 8 and there's a 17, uh, between, let's say, 8 and 18. There's an 18. 19, yeah. Um, and uh, you want to roll over that number, and so you spend proficiency slots to bring the number down and make it more likely that you can succeed. But you can't ever uh, bring your chance of
Hmm.
success number below a 3.
And it's not connected to an
Um,
attribute, huh? That's an interesting. Huh.
uh, no, I don't believe it is.
I mean,
Um,
so this is just two or 3 years later in 1988, and when you look at the general skills, the way it's set up in the Dwarves of Rockholm, it's actually a pretty nice little package. They just they basically say, look, every beginning character knows 4 skills. Here's how to use them. Here's a sample with some text of how to do it, and then if you want to improve it, you can actually increase your skill roll to a higher score than what your ability was that it was based on by trading in some of your choices, some of so you can basically specialize and get fewer skills, but have an easier chance of succeeding at the ones that you do have. And then it tells, it says basically, it says it's the
mhm.
DM who decides when a character may try a skill roll, and it's the DM who decides what sort of effect the skill has in a given situation. And it's the responsibility of the DM to see to it that the players don't abuse the skills and achieve results, that are totally inappropriate to the skill. That would be abuse. It's also the responsibility of the DM to reward characters who use their skills cleverly. So, it sort of it assumes that if you want to use this, you're still leaving it in the hands of the DM. But it's directly connected to attributes. There's no skill in here that's not connected to an attribute roll, so it makes the attributes matter.
Yep, yep. Um, that uh, certainly that model of
Hmm.
connected to attributes in some way is the one that's going to survive.
I wonder if it actually grew because this was later than Oriental Adventures, so I wonder if it grew out of feedback that they received from the skill system in Oriental Adventures. You know what I mean?
I mean that makes sense to me. Um, it's uh, at least with some of the skills in here, it makes sense to me that in World of Adventures, that is, it makes sense to me that you wouldn't want to tie them too closely to ability scores
Hmm.
because deciding which ability score gets to be the one that plays a crafter
Yeah,
uh, is one of the fundamental problems of designing a crafting system for tabletop
right.
games. Um, uh, because, well, does only the fighter get to use your crafting system because you tied it to strength? That's that's not really sensible. Does only the wizard? That's not better.
Hmm.
Um, and so you have all these artisan skills, and the book clearly believes that you're going to be involved in a substantial number of artisan contests. Uh, it goes out of its way to discuss the fact that that's a major way to um, engage with the honor economy,
Hmm.
right? It is to compete in, in contests relating to your skills.
Right.
Um,
Which is fascinating in terms of setting building.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I mean, there's plenty that's been said and plenty to say about how this book exoticizes um, Asia and uh, medieval
Sure.
Asian cultures.
And the name
But
itself is problematic.
oh yeah, but I think that uh, even the model of presenting a D&D that where honor is the primary uh, aim and combat is more incidental is
Hmm.
fascinating. It's certainly something I would be interested in seeing uh, approached in other D&D
Hmm.
adjacent games.
Hmm.
I'm under the impression that um, there are many settings where that would be appropriate, Glorantha or Tecumel.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, but in any case, that that about sums me up for Oriental Adventures, and so I'm ready to leap into second edition if you are.
Yeah, it sounds like that's almost like a proto skill system.
I really think that's the best way to summarize it, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
And I would go so far actually also to say that the what's in the Gazetteers, while more developed, or while seemingly more developed because it's attached to attributes, it's also a sort of proto skill system, because it still leaves so much up to the DM in terms of, well, what do I actually do with that skill? There are a lot of skills, and they're all attached to a particular attribute.
yeah,
Some of them are very generalized and vague, and it's up to the DM to determine whether that skill means that the player can do some activity that they might think is related to that skill, and it would cause, in game terms, it would at the table, it would cause that player to have to kind of sell the DM on that item. Oh, well, yeah, of course I can attempt this particular action because I have this skill, and that obviously would include the ability to do this thing, right? Like if your skill is horseback riding, obviously that should include how to maintain and care for a saddle, how to put the bit and bridle on, how to, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, and basically, so the groomsman, being the horse groomer, all of those skills should be involved in riding the horse. Someone might say that, right?
Yeah.
And if your DM doesn't buy it, then your DM doesn't buy it, and that skill isn't going to be used in that situation. So it's still a kind of a proto system that's really, a lot of it is left open to interpretation in terms of how
Hold the phone.
that skill could actually be applied.
Hold
Yeah.
the damn phone. Are you telling me that when you say no to your players, they drop it? Get
I didn't
out.
say that.
Get out. That is a
I didn't
dirty
say all that.
lie. I think we
but
both
but
know that if you say no to your players, you just have a fight. And that fight's going to keep coming up. Uh
right. Well, but remember the difference in play style
huh.
for these earlier editions is vast.
I'm just suggesting that people haven't changed that much.
People haven't changed, but the thing is, uh, boy, how do I say this? Lots of people played for many years under very poor DMs,
Oh boy.
poor in skill, not poor in money, although that probably too, uh, because there weren't a lot of DMs around, and there wasn't an easy way to find them. So it was very difficult if you had a DM. Most people eventually would decide, okay, well, if I'm going to still play in this game, I'm going to drop this particular topic because this DM's not going to give in, and they're just becoming more of a jerk and not adjudicating this the way I want to go because they're punishing me for questioning them. Which, this is not an episode about good or bad DMing skills, but that happened a lot. It also happened a lot that there were some really awesome, great DMs, and so there were no problems. So, I'm not trying to paint
Oh, no,
anything
I
with the
understand that.
broad brush, but there was enough of an issue at enough tables that I think it's fair to say that behavior was variable. And I think at some tables there would be a discussion, and it was expected that the DM's word is final. And if you didn't let it go, then the DM is going to punish you in some way, or maybe not you, but maybe your character. I think that was unfortunately a paradigm that was alive and well at a lot of tables. So
Which will lead to a new free and frank exchange of ideas. In
right.
my experience as a second edition GM.
But remember what you and I have already concluded about second edition. We've concluded that there's a lot more player facing material, and it's sort of the first edition where really the players are allowed to know some of the rules.
Yep.
And so that was a whole new way to communicate. So I think maybe it did invite some questioning and some adjudication conversations. Let's call them conversations. So yeah. So let's jump into second edition then, since we're already there.
Yep. So, so here again we have skills that are tied to ability scores, um, and you have a different number of non-weapon proficiency slots. Um, that is a phrase that I am going to be stumbling over. I've stumbled over it for the last 20 something years, and so I don't think I'm going to solve that speech impediment soon. I'm going to call them skill slots. Is that cool with you? Skill slots?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Um, you have a, you have a different number of skill slots based on your class, uh, both starting and advancement rate. Um,
So let me remind the audience, in second edition, they split the classes into these 4 groups. There was the warrior group and the priest group and the
Wizard and rogue.
was it rogue? Okay, it was the rogue group and the wizard group. And within each of those you had sort of classes that fit within that umbrella. So the warrior had, the fighter, the cavalier, whatever, the and the paladin maybe. And then the rogue had, thief and ranger. Wait, was ranger was probably under warrior.
Ranger
I
was
don't
a
know. I don't
warrior.
remember, but you get the idea. You get the idea that there are certain sets of I'd have to open my book. It's on the bookshelf. And so there's different classes have different they're in different categories. And so that means that what skills are open to you at first are have to fall under the category.
Yep. Um, well, well, sort of. All the skills are open to you. You just might have to pay double. Uh, and so your starting number of skill slots is that number plus your number of languages from intelligence, because you can pick up skill slots instead of languages.
Is it tied to intelligence? How many languages you can speak, you mean?
Right. And I believe that number of languages, if you're using the optional non-weapon proficiency system, uh, is then your number of extra skill slots. So you have wizards who have just skill slots coming out their ears, um, and
Right.
they have no problem paying uh, double the number of skill slots to get skills out of, say, the warrior category. And while we're talking about those proficiency groups, uh, you know, the ranger was a warrior, but uh, they bought skills at listed price rather than double price uh, from warrior and general. Those are the two you'd expect, and wizard. Record scratch. What?
They were casters though, right?
Not arcane casters.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
They were druid casters. They
Mm.
used the druid spell list.
Hmm.
I would have accepted priest or rogue way before wizard. I don't know. Um, the bard being rogue, warrior, wizard, and general, sure, no problem.
I wonder if they did that because the wizard proficiency list has astrology, so watching the stars, I suppose, could fall under there. Herbalism.
So does priest, also priest.
Oh yeah, I guess so, huh? Oh, look at that. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
I'm looking at my book right now, so
yeah. The overlap between priest and wizard is very very strong. So I don't know, man. They wanted to be different. I don't know.
maybe that's it. They just
Uh,
wanted it to be different.
so anyway, as I've hinted at, there's also a general list that everyone buys at the listed cost. Um, but uh, there's a huge number of skills in this book, um, and once you start digging into what they do, because there's a skill entry for each one that explains what each one does, you start realizing that they're actually feats.
Hmm.
Calling them skills is kind of right, but they're actually proto-feats, especially the ones that are called non-weapon or proficiencies, but they come really close to being a different kind of combat skill. Blind fighting is the most obvious, of course. Uh, I mean,
Yeah.
it's yes, it's a combat skill. It just happens to not be about your weapon, sort of. But then charioteering is also a way of fighting, right?
Right.
Um, and then riding airborne and riding land based are ways of fighting. They're essential to combat. Um,
You know what I want to do? I want to compare this list with the list in the Rules Cyclopedia because
that's absolutely worth doing.
I feel like
Uh, I mean, this one is longer. It's not wildly longer, and you do have all
I
of
don't.
the rule cyclopedia's parenthetical specify. It's knowledge category or the like. There's tons and tons of expansible ones,
Right.
right? Language, choose type. Knowledge, choose type. Science, choose type.
This has that too. It's just not as explicit about it. This
Right.
is a pretty. This is a So yeah, I mean, I'll bet you these lists almost exactly match.
That's probably fair.
Yeah, because I don't see anything here that is not that's on one list and not on the other. I mean, I'm just glancing. Oh, except for blind fighting. Although you know what they have here, blind shooting.
Mm-hmm. And of course, rules in the rule cyclopedia, it's writing choose type, not writing land-based or writing airborne. Because thanks for that.
Right, right. Yeah.
Anyway, so you have all these proto-feats, and they're varied and interesting, and they're positive statements of things you can do in a lot of cases, with or without a skill roll. And then this list gets, as you'd expect, hugely expanded in the splat books.
Right.
Um,
The reason I wanted to look up the BECMI list is that when you said that, I thought to myself, that's probably true of BECMI as well, that these are basically proto-feats. And
I think that's a fair argument
yeah,
to say of the BECMI list, especially blind shooting, right?
yeah, at least the way it's presented in the cyclopedia, because the cyclopedia came out actually after the release of second edition. So they did include rules in the cyclopedia for converting your BECMI character into a second edition AD&D character. So I think they wanted to have as close a match as possible.
Nice.
So I would say that they are probably almost exactly the same, and I do agree that they are sort of proto-feats.
And I've always thought that was one of the most interesting things about them, right? Um, it's sort of that early recognition of, well, people want uh, ways to add a little extra customization to their characters level over level, and Lord knows you're not going to find that in most of the second edition classes.
Hmm.
That's not like you're not making choices when you level up for classes that don't have thief skills. We do need to say that first edition and second edition thieves still have percentile skills, uh, and in second edition, those percentile skills uh, are largely the same as your list from the original, um, but they start at some higher percentages, and later uh, later books add still more skills. So you wind up with a bribery skill and escape artist skill, and
Mm,
I think a tunneling skill shows up in Dark Sun,
yeah,
and there's at least one that I'm forgetting about, but I think it might be encryption and decryption as separate from read languages. Uh, I have the books on my shelf, but I can't pull them out because of where my chair
yeah.
is.
Well, and uh, trying to find specifically that thing that doesn't really matter for the purposes of conversation. I will cede the point to you. Yeah.
Um, but what I wanted to say about it is that this is the point where you really have the two systems most in tension with each other. So it's not always clear how you determine whether or not you hear a noise
Hmm.
if you don't have the detect noise or hear noise skill from being a thief.
So here's the thing: in the earlier editions, detect noise was the only one that wasn't percentile.
Yep,
Listening was a D6 roll, and you had to roll a 1 or a 2, so you had a 33% chance of succeeding. But by the time you
yep,
get to second edition, listening is uses percentage, I believe, just the same as every other thief skill. Also, they call them skills for the thief in second edition rather than calling them thieving abilities, which is
yep.
interesting in itself.
Well, and just for maximum confusion, there's also a one-off stealth system that is not available to all thieves, but is available to elves and halflings.
Mm, of
Um,
course.
they have a special racial ability that is based on the roll of a d6 to uh, surprising people in combat, and then you take penalties to your d6 roll if you have to get through a door or a screen.
I was thinking of the halfling's propensity to sort of hide easier than everyone else.
Yeah, yeah, um, is sort of also a thing. So what I would say of second edition is that uh, this is really the edition where you see that the game has not made up its mind how any non-combat stuff is going to work, and uh, they don't settle on one answer.
Right.
They settle on all the answers, uh, because actually, for the sake of completeness, the non-weapon proficiency system is not the only uh, skill system that GMs have to choose from within this book. Uh, there's also a secondary skill
Right.
system, um, which, from a fifth edition perspective, we'd call your background.
Hmm.
Um, so it suggests that you'd roll percentile dice to determine your secondary skill, but you're rolling for a trade skill.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a bunch of common ones to choose from. There's no attached resolution system for that beyond uh, the player and the DM coming to some kind of agreement over whether or not they can do the thing that's associated with their background.
And as we said before, of course, you'll always agree.
Oh, sure, that's how that works. That's how humans are. And you know, I think that maybe a more charitable reading of ourselves when we were handling second edition um, mapped forward is to see a real close kinship between those secondary skills and the backgrounds found in 13th Age,
Hmm.
uh, where you spend a number of discretionary points on defining a background for your character and figuring out what that is going to mean, and having a conversation about what is or isn't included in the umbrella of uh, whatever background you define for yourself. But at least there's still a clear statement of what you roll and how you roll it to determine success or failure. And squinting yet a bit more, I think that you can kind of sort of see a similarity to feng shui's rich skill system, where skill in guns is not only skill in shooting guns, but also skill in maintaining guns and skill in knowing who to talk to about guns. So uh, it applies to you know any task that relates to guns in any meaningful way, rather than splitting that into a contacts skill and a gunsmithing skill and then a shooting skill.
Right. So one of the interesting things now that's going to connect up when we get to fifth edition and we talk about how it describes tool use in Xanathar's Guide to Everything,
Oh
which
man,
greatly
yeah,
expands what a toolkit allows you to do and what knowledge it assumes you have if you are proficient with that toolkit.
yep.
So, things like a navigator's kit or a carpenter's kit, those kind of things kind of call back to these secondary skills.
I absolutely think so. Yeah.
Interesting.
Um, the one more thing I wanted to say about second edition skills is that you then have the skills and powers revised second edition. Um, Calling it a 2.5 edition is not incorrect. Um,
And I know many people do.
oh yeah, which largely keeps the non I told you I couldn't say it, non-weapon proficiency system of second edition, but then splits all the ability scores into two aspects. I mean, they're still called that word I can't say apparently, uh, and uh, they're still named the same thing, but they're all point based rather than slot
Hmm.
based. So costs range from 2 points up to there's a 5, and you have an initial rating, but then a related ability.
And this is in
So this
skills
is
and
in
powers.
skills and
Okay.
powers.
Yeah.
And as far as unintuitive goes, I mean that's pretty strong. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to thumb through the book and figure it out briefly because I've actually known this
Yeah.
before and I don't remember it now. And
What I
Lord,
remember about about all three of those books, the skills and powers, and then what was it, combat and tactics, and then spells and something,
yep,
spells and magic.
spells and magic and
Yeah.
high level
So
campaigns.
so those books are really proto third edition. You know, combat and tactics really started to sort of stretch the second edition.
So I agree with that. Um, I think you can definitely pick things out that are
Hmm.
presaging third edition in a meaningful way. Um, but I think that there's a lot of sort of uh, struggling against the
Hmm.
game's engine going on to
Sure,
try to get
sure. Well,
there.
that's why I say proto, right? I don't think there are a lot of straight lines. I think the lines from that to what we got in third edition are squiggly and full of switchbacks and steep inclines and declines. But nonetheless,
So, so right, I've looked up initial rating, and it is um, a thing that can cost you more points if your ability score is too low. It's just
yeah.
so messy, and like reading it quickly, I can't figure it out. So I assume that no one played it right.
That's probably a safe assumption, actually.
Like Sam, I do this professionally. If I can't do it quickly, most people can't do it slow.
Yeah. Well, and it's the sort of thing where, when you're at the table, right? How much fun is it when the DM pulls out a book and says, "Well, let me see. I think there's a rule about that."
Right.
Or, "Oh, I don't remember how that one works. Let me look it up." And then you can't find it.
Well, God bless Merles and Crawford for writing something basically comprehensible.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, that is all I can stand to look at that book because the typeface is also monstrous.
So let's stop here, and we will continue in the next episode. But for now, we will say goodbye. We'll speak to you next time.
All right, peace, everyone.